What's up guys, welcome to a new YouTube video, and this time it's Ask Fedor time. We started to ask you, and now these were some of the favorite questions and I will go through them. One of the questions has been Miguel Baron 4 on Instagram, and he asked, is poker worth it? Now, if you ask this question, then I think at first already, poker is probably not worth it. Because if you start by calculating whether it's worth it or not, then you probably think about it in monetary value, and then you probably, I probably would suggest to not do it. So I think the first driver for poker should be fun. That's what I saw most of the pros I know. They started because they like the competitive side of things, they like the learning aspect of things. So regarding whether poker is worth it, you can make a lot of money with poker, but only very few people do so. It is pretty tough nowadays. Other people obviously have an advantage if you start out right now. So if you think about starting just to make money, I would say you need to enjoy the process. If you don't like playing games, if you don't like strategy games, if you don't like to sit in front of the computer a lot, then it's certainly not for you. If you like that, then I think poker can be worth it. In terms of how much, I think you can get quite quickly to making a couple $10,000 a year with playing poker. If you improve for a couple years or like 2-3 years, I think you can get to that point, and you study with the right people and you look for a good group. I think you can make it in poker. In terms of getting to the really high levels and making hundreds of thousands in poker, I think that is very difficult. Most won't make it, and it takes a lot of years. And in terms of making millions with poker is extremely unlikely. Only very, very few make that, and is almost impossible. Now, the second question, numero dos, is how do you see yourself versus the top MTT pros? Aren't you hungry to be the best again? That's a great question. The answer would have been very different if you would have asked me 2 years ago or now. The short answer is I actually study quite a lot right now. On average, I would say I study about an hour a day, sometimes more, sometimes less. The main reason, I really like the studying aspect. I really like teaching people at Pokercode, but I also like studying with my friends. So I do that on a regular basis. It kind of keeps my mind going, and I really like that I'm on a high level in poker already, so I can talk with people on a pretty advanced level, and there's always things that I can learn, especially with how solvers are progressing right now. So it's just a fun mental exercise. In terms of the competitive aspect, with Corona and last year, I really got back into it again, and there was this competitive feeling again. So I really felt like I wanna get better. I didn't feel at all like committing to becoming the best. Like this was never something I wanted even to try. That also felt pretty good to not, I don't need to have this obsession with it. I can just do it, still be competitive and have fun doing it, but don't be excessive with it. So I think I found a pretty nice sweet spot. I think I'm still pretty competitive. I believe that I'm still a top pro and can play in the higher stakes and be a winning player. Probably not in absolutely everything. There are some tournaments where I believe there's mostly better players, but these are really just a very tiny super high rollers without much fish. So this way. That's my experience in poker the last 2 years. So I am somewhat hungry again. Okay, question number 3. Okay, this name is difficult. Probably Dutch, I guess. Luke Nieuwenhuis 1 on Instagram. Did you take risk with your bankroll management? I would say sometimes too much, sometimes not enough. That would be my answer. There was this thing that everyone learned back then is 100 buy-ins. Like somehow 100 buy-ins was everywhere. Every strategy article was like, oh, you should have 100 buy-ins, 200 buy-ins if there's high variance games. I think this is bullshit. It really, really depends on your situation. It really depends on your win rate. It really depends on the games. There were spots where I was a really, really big winner and I should have taken much, much, much bigger pieces than I did. And there were spots where I was a really small winner and I took too big pieces. I believe that it really depends on how big your edge is, the variance in the spot, and what you emotionally can handle. So there were some spots where I was really dumb because I didn't want to have a small piece of myself, or like I just wanted to gamble a little bit, but it never was really excessive. So the biggest was maybe 3% of my net worth or something like that. maybe 5 tops. Like I would say that's the range where my biggest piece ever was. So there's other people who can tell much crazier stories. And then on the other hand, there are spots where I probably should have taken 10 or 20% and I only took like 2%. So I am definitely one of the most aggressive in my group of friends, and I would say I wasn't aggressive enough in most spots. So that's my take on it. But I want to add, if you're learning in something and you're not an expert yet, these are exactly the spots where you should not take much risk. Like just invest in your learning, invest in getting to know the space better, but don't take too much risk or invest too much. That's certainly something I learned in business, where I should have invested much less in the beginning and then just learn the space. Okay, question number 4. Daubo80 on Instagram, shout out to Daubo. Without poker, is there anything similar that you have the same drive for? Yes, there is definitely not many. There are some games that I really enjoy, but to a less time extent. I really enjoy playing strategy games with friends. Soccer is probably the other thing. I played thousands of hours of soccer in my life, and I have more passion for soccer than for poker, I would say. So that is definitely high up there. And then actually the product building side of things. So I really, really like the work at Pokercode, and I can certainly see myself doing more of that in the future. So that is the second thing. And I love having conversations and learning new things in general. So whenever there's a really exciting conversation with someone where I learn something, absolutely love that. Shout out to Adriano Alves from the Pokercode community. He's question number 5. What is the biggest pot you played in a private cash game? I would say that it was, I don't remember the exact numbers. I would believe that it was roughly a 1.6 to 1.8 million euros pot. To be honest, I cannot repeat exactly what has happened. There are pots in the same game and in another game that were similar size that I remember much more vividly. Because I think when pots are really standard and there's nothing really standing out, then I don't remember them as much when there's something really painful. So one pot I remember really vividly is I was playing in Macau in a private cash game. We played, I believe, 1K, 2K, 4K US dollars. I had maybe about $600K in front of me. So the pot must have been 1.2 million roughly. It was, I think he was from Indonesia or Singapore or Malaysia, something like that. And he triple barreled against me in a spot. I believe the board was something like ace 5-3 deuce 7. The guy was so nervous, and I have seen him having good hands before. And in that spot, I called down ace 6, where I felt very certain that he was bluffing on the river. I had a flush draw on the turn and then called his bet, and then he jams river. A very vague hand history, but I basically, after a long tank, call ace 6, so ace high on the river, and he shows ace 8 off for a bluff. So my read was pretty on point, but he wins the pot for like 1.1 or 1.2 million with like ace 8 against ace 6. That was very, very painful. I still remember that. So weird spots when you feel pretty certain as he's bluffing, but you don't know whether he's bluffing a pair or bluffing a better ace high. But yeah, it just felt like it could easily been something like king queen or king 10 or queen 10, something like that. So that was a very brutal hand. The other really big pot that I remember was jacks against aces for about 1.2 million euros as well. That one I remember as well because I think it was a probably bad stack off pre. So yeah, these were the biggest cash game pots I played. I just played in really big games like that a couple times, but overall I did well. The next question, FLPHBL on Instagram. What is your favorite book and why? I had a really good friend ask me this question just recently, and actually it is always changing depending on my mood or what I'm really interested in right now. But one of the books I have recommended and given as a present the most is The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. I really, really love that book. It's about Josh himself, how he becomes A, one of the best chess players in the world, but B, push hands, so Tai Chi world champion in a really short time, and how he learns that, and just generally his approach to learning. And I just absolutely love that book around learning, and it inspired me a lot in some ways. So I really love that book, and maybe that's interesting to some. The last question of this segment is from Milko, the head of marketing of Pokercode. What's the biggest piece monetary value you ever had in a tournament? And did you cash? And what is the most money someone else won for you that you had a piece of? Also, these numbers, I don't know exactly, but I believe the tournament where I had the biggest piece was the $1 million one drop. I think I had maybe 300 to $350K of my own action. I was invested in this tournament over $1 million. I believe 1.1 or $1.2 million invested. So I had action of almost everyone, and I think no piece cashed. So only I myself cashed, and I didn't do extremely well on this in the tournament. Not as good as it might seem, but yeah, so that was the biggest piece I ever took, I think. I had big pieces in the cash game as well, and it did well there. The biggest piece I had of someone else, or the biggest best performance I had of someone else, was Reiner in the Super High Roller Bowl, I would say. And probably there's a couple people who are up there. So David W Coop online win was really massive for me. Reiner's Super High Roller Bowl was pretty big for me. Korai's one drop win, or third where I won, that was pretty big. So I would say these were the main cashes that I think of, and I probably am forgetting some. So there were some pretty massive cashes in there, and it started to rain now, ice, which is also really interesting. Vienna's going nuts right now. But yeah, this was actually really fun. I hope you had some interesting insights in these questions. And if you have questions, send them to us, drop them in the comment box below. We will select some for the next video. So if there's anything you ever wanted to ask me, just shout it out. Give thumbs up to the comments that you like the most, or the questions you like the most. And if you like the content, make sure to leave us a subscribe and a thumbs up, because that's what keeps us going and what motivates me and the team. So I'd really appreciate that. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.